Thank you again for attending how News Corp secured their digital transformation through identity and access management. My name is David Wright. I'm a solution architect at AWS, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined today with Madhu from Okta and Nicholas Taylor from News Corp to talk about how the solution can show value in your organization. So, given what we know about today's environment and the amount of bad actors that are currently available or acting on the internet at the moment, we know that there's been some high-profile attacks and data vulnerabilities taken about in the last, within the last few days even. We have seen attacks at Equifax, which has exposed over 100 million users and their data to attacks and unknown sources, where they don't even know how to even recover those data because the security questions and elements were taken with them too. Even more recently, we've seen an email server compromised at Deloitte, exposing both usernames and passwords. So the number of attacks that we're seeing is on the increase. The complexity and the skill of the attackers is becoming even greater. We're seeing the value of the actual breach and the amount and the type of data that the user is going after becoming even more and more valuable. And more importantly, we're seeing a real dent in reputation. So as this stat shows, over 70% of customers that would avoid a business following a security breach. So obviously this is going to have a massive impact on your potential issue if your organization has a security breach. So now that we've established that the internet isn't secure, how can we help you? Well, AWS and the cloud is fundamentally built around security. It's their primary concern, and it's for a primary goal to make sure that we can provide you with a more secure environment than your existing on-premise element. Now, this can be done in a number of ways. Firstly, the integrated tools that come as part of the cloud. So we have things such as automated login, CloudTrail, CloudWatch. We've had simplified resource access, so using IAM and integrating in with products like Okta to be able to provide a rich IAM strategy, being able to encrypt data both in transit and at rest, and being able to provide strong encryption mechanisms and also mechanisms such as the KMS that allow for key rotation and key management. All of these things go together to work hand in hand with the other elements that AWS puts in place, such as the shared security responsibility model, which I'll talk about later, the certifications, which we'll go into later, and the actual underlying team security team that actually watches and monitors the environment. So the global footprint. So AWS is obviously globally available across 44 availability zones and 16 regions. And this global footprint goes together to build out a service that can be accessed by multiple or organizations all over the world and allows you to take applications to go global very quickly. Another reason that's important about that global footprint and the high availability that's provided by that global footprint is the fact that as part of high availability, this high availability gives you the benefit of being able to start absorbing and sustaining attacks. So, for example, we can leverage the power of the cloud to mitigate DDoS attacks against the Route 53 service or DNS. We can integrate and use the elasticity of the cloud to automatically grow resources using auto-scaling to actually take on the demand of those volumetric attacks, to actually sustain them long enough to analyze what the attack type is and come up with an appropriate response. So that when you respond to attack, not only can you identify where it's coming from, but also be able to respond and shut down the attack in an appropriate way. All of these things go together to actually help you provide control and regulation and compliance around all of the elements that you need to provide whilst working within the cloud. So all of these things work together to be able to provide a high degree of certification and assurance. Now, AWS has worked quite diligently to become certified in a lot of different areas. So we have SOC 1, 2, and 3 compliance. We have ISO 2001, 17, and 18. We have in the US FedRAMP, we're PCI compliant, and here in Australia we have IRAP. What do these certifications mean is that there is a set of standards and assurances that have been put together to meet the most security conscious customer. But because of the way that the cloud and the advantages of the way that the cloud is put together, this means that when AWS works with one of those customers to achieve one of these standards, all of those standards are put in place for all of its customers. So even if you're a much smaller organization that doesn't really have any requirement for certification elements, you get the benefits of the cloud being brought up to reach the certifications of the more strict and more, and shall we say, even more paranoid security conscious customers. So I talked about it a little bit, and I just want to go into a little bit more depth about the shared security responsibility model. Now, the shared security responsibility model is AWS defining what is our responsibility and what is yours as a customer. So the responsibility of AWS is of the cloud, and that generally is up to the hypervisor level. And then everything after that is the responsibility of the customer and their partners to build applications securely in the cloud. Now, this opens up a great opportunity for partners such as Okta to be able to work with their customers and their partners to produce even more flexible and feature-rich security elements that can fit in the cloud and help augment those applications in a more secure way. With that said, we'll now hand over to Madhu to talk about what those options are and how streamlining your identity is going to help keep you secure.
Okta was founded in 2009 by two founders from ex-employees of Salesforce. So they had a lot of experience in terms of building SaaS offerings and SaaS platforms. Todd McKinnon and Freddie both built this platform in order to help people connect to technology. One of the key decisions that they made at that time was to choose AWS as that infrastructure platform. They knew that in order to do identity at scale, they had to build this platform, this service on top of a scalable, secure platform. So currently we're in multiple regions. We take advantage of pretty much everything that AWS has to offer. So that includes, EC2, S3, Docker services like ECS, some of the things that David mentioned in terms of key management service, so we can have private keys for each tenant that is created in Okta. We take advantage of CloudFront and other scalability type of functionality, so we can provide that service at a high scale. Currently, we're over 1,000 employees or so, and we're growing. We're growing pretty quick. And we see this growth in terms of not only in terms of employees, but also in terms of customers who are out there who are choosing Okta to help them protect their and provide identity and access management services. One of the key columns I would point out over here is the second column under the cloud column over there. Those are all SaaS-based companies. They are built on top of a cloud-based infrastructure, and they use Okta as their identity and access management service as well. So let's talk about some of the challenges in identity and access management, right? As Dave mentioned earlier, I mean, what we're seeing out there are breaches of various kinds. On the flip side of it, a secure architecture, a highly secure architecture cannot compromise on usability as well. You still need to do business. You still need to have employees access their applications. So finding that right balance between security and usability is something which is very important to us. We kind of segment our user population in about 3 or 4 different buckets over here. You see some of those buckets over here. How do we help employees and contractors? Or what are the challenges that developers are having when they build applications? Maybe you're doing business on the web with business partners, suppliers, distributors. How do we address or make it easy for them to kind of get into your business and maybe check some inventory or place some orders? And last but not the least, consumers, right? Whether it is a loyalty program that your company might have, or if you're directly selling and if you need to provide some support or help desk type of functionality, how do you directly interact with your consumers and customers? So that balancing act between security and user experience is going to be a theme throughout Okta. We try to make it flexible so that you're going to be able to use policies to control at what appropriate point do you need to step up that authentication, and when you can maybe let down your guard, maybe for a low impact application, if you will. A couple of key things that I want to point out over here. In specific, Okta has some interesting features and unique value propositions with respect to AWS. If you are a sophisticated AWS customer, you probably have multiple AWS accounts. Okta can help you manage those AWS accounts very easily, and we can tie that back into your HR systems roles and responsibilities. So we look at an HR system as the source of truth. We can integrate with that HR system, or it could be Active Directory if that's what you have, and then make decisions in terms of who gets access to what. So we see 4 key areas of value that we're able to provide, right? So back to how we effectively give access and revoke access to your employees. Perhaps contractors who are coming in during your high season and maybe they leave after a couple of months. How can we automate that whole process, that employee life cycle, if you will? For developers, it's all about access to management consoles, perhaps to GitHub or Jira or PagerDuty and other development type of console or services out there. How can we manage those kind of functionality? For business partners, it's going to be able to federate outside of your enterprise to your business partner's identity and access management system. So we're going to be able to allow your partner, your distributor, your retailer use their own identity, but log in securely into your application that you have. Similarly, for consumers, they can use something that they know, perhaps a Facebook account, in order to log in into your services. We can look at this from a business lens as well, right? And how do we kind of address these 3 key areas? One is, how do we decrease costs while increasing that efficiency? There's a couple of different, themes that we see out there. Perhaps increasing that M&A agility, or trying to modernize your IT stack. You're trying to move from your on-prem system into the cloud. Okta has a role to play over there along with AWS. The other way to look at it is, I need to secure my business. Perhaps there have been some audit concerns that have come up, and you need to protect against those data breaches. Or you have a mobile workforce where people are bringing their own devices, an iPhone, an Android, and they work from any coffee shops, for instance. And how do you protect that kind of an access? Or it could be, how do you accelerate your business growth? You want people to be able to log in into your services quickly in a secure manner and do their business. In those particular cases, we want to provide them that seamless, secure customer experience. And I'll talk about the Okta Identity Cloud. That's our solution in terms of how we're able to address all of these different various concerns and values. So we see out there in the market a number of customers who have picked Okta for these various business problems that they've or challenges that they've tried to overcome. Certainly, News Corp is one, but there's others as you see out here. Because Okta is built on top of AWS, we're able to take advantage of all of the certifications and investments that they've made in protecting that the cloud. The easy ones are over here: the ISO standards, the HIPAA standards, the FedRAMP, the CSA attestations, Type 2 SOC 2 certification. And all of this information is available to you. You can review it. We primarily divide up our products into these different segments, right? So on the left-hand side, what you'll see is our basic product, if you will, our single sign-on product. So this is, best-in-class access to all of your SaaS applications, all of your web applications. You log in once into your console, and then you click on a link to get into your application, and that's it, right? If that application needs to have higher level of authentication, we can then prompt for a multi-factor authentication at that point as well. Universal Directory is our directory where we're able to store information about users, about groups, what kind of devices do they have. And not only that, we're able to integrate that Universal Directory along with HR systems, with Active Directory, with homegrown databases, with LDAP, and bring all of that information in and combine them in order to present one canonical view of that user. We're able to do things like password management in AD, or change attributes, like you maybe import some information from a data source. We can change the value of the attribute depending on your business rules and then push it down to another system. Lifecycle management is our product, which allows you to manage those identities in various downstream systems. Those identities that reside in AD or in Salesforce or in Concur. These are all systems that we are able to manage that identity. So when someone goes on a vacation or they are on long-term disability, we're able to reduce that access when they don't need to have access. Mobility management is our way to control BYOD devices. And Okta's got a pretty interesting approach over here, where we do it without any agents that need to be installed, or a sandbox or virtual machine that needs to be installed on various mobile devices. We have a very lightweight approach over here, so we're able to manage those iPhones and Androids in terms of how to segregate information from your corporate profile, your corporate work profile, from your personal profile. And if for some reason you are terminated, or that mobile device needs to be removed, or the corporate information has to be removed, the administrator can do that via our console. Adaptive MFA is our multi-factor authentication product. It's gotten more and more sophisticated over the years, where we're able to take into account the user's context in terms of where are they logging from, what are they trying to access, which groups do they belong to. And taking into account all of this information, we're able to make decisions then based on the rules that you set up on whether we need to allow them access, deny them access, or perhaps we need to step up the access so that they need to provide additional authentication mechanisms in order to access that application. In the last couple of years, we also introduced our API access management component. What this is all about in terms of, as companies are providing APIs for mobile applications, perhaps you're building a mobile application, or if you're building a web portal with APIs, backend APIs, or if you're conducting business with other companies out there via your APIs, and that may be to place orders or to check inventory and those kind of things. Those APIs need to be protected, and Okta has full OAuth 2.0 support in order to protect those APIs. And last but not the least, if you're building a product, if you're building a SaaS application, or if you're building an internal application, we've got SDKs for pretty much every major language. So you don't need to build most of this logic. You can embed our SDKs, our libraries in your app programming framework of choice and utilize Okta services via those SDKs. Our strategy has been confirmed by Gartner, and we created the identity and access management as a service category, and we did this about for the last 3 years. We were always the leader. This year in 2017, Gartner combined or got rid of the identity and access management as a service category and came up with a brand new category called access management. And as you'll note over here, Okta is clearly the leader in execution, and we've always been a leader for the last 4 years, including this year. So I want to summarize the 4 key use cases or scenarios that Okta is able to help with. The first one is, how do we secure access to your management console, right? So this is your AWS console where you're able to turn on EC2 servers or delete S3 buckets or provision DynamoDB. And you may have multiple accounts, as I mentioned. And if you have all of those, how do you control access to your developers, to your engineering staff, to various projects? Okta is able to do that via information that we can pick up from your HR systems or from AD or LDAP, and then make sure that that developer or that DevOps person only has access to those accounts that they need access to. The second scenario over here is probably the most common scenario that we kind of come up with, which is, how do we help employees access all of their business productivity applications? These business productivity applications are your typical Office 365, Salesforce, or RingCentral, or Box, or they could be some of Amazon's AppStream, or QuickSight, or Workspaces, Redshift, and so on and so forth. These are all tools that we're able to integrate with and make sure that where needed, we can provide that multi-factor authentication and then allow them access into those services. And what's also needed in most of these things is that it's all single sign-on. So you log in once, authenticate as per your password policy, as per your sign-on policy, and then you don't need to re-authenticate again when you need to, unless your policy requires it to. The third scenario is when you're building applications directly to meet the requirement for your consumers. Perhaps this is a mobile application, or perhaps this is a web portal that you're building. If you need your consumers to easily log in using their LinkedIn or Facebook or Google or Microsoft accounts, we're able to do that. Okta provides support for all of those social providers, so we can get that authentication done and then pass it off quickly to your application, which can be built on top of AWS S3 or Lambdas and API gateways. Last but not the least, if you are in a B2B business where you're dealing with suppliers and partners, what you're going to find is that your suppliers and distributors, your partners, may all have their own way of authenticating their employees. Okta can act as that hub, and therefore we can authenticate your partners' AD domains. Perhaps they have LDAP, perhaps they have another identity and access management system. Whatever it is, Okta can act as that hub, and we can then authenticate that user and pass that off to the application that you have behind the scenes. So at this point in time, I'd like to send it over to Nick from News Corp and Adrian, and maybe hear a little bit more about how they've implemented Okta and what kind of benefits they saw.
Thanks very much, Madhu. Hi everyone, my name's Nicholas Tan. I'm the Chief Architect of Infrastructure Cloud and Cyber at News Corp Australia, and I'm joined with Adrian Noblet, who's the CTO at Heirloom, who is the integration and delivery partner for our implementation of Okta. So a little bit about News Corp Australia. We're Australia's #1 media company. We're headquartered in Sydney, Australia. We're the #1 ranked news site in Australia with a monthly unique audience of over 6 million people. Our news network reaches more than 13 million Australians a month, which is more than half of our population through our key metropolitan and national mastheads. And we're also the #1 advertiser destination for a lifestyle categories such as food, health, travel across key platforms such as our website taste.com.au and publications Body and Soul and our weekend papers, Vogue Australia, GQ, Escape, well-known brands within the country. So just going to the challenge that we had previous legacy implementation of an identity solution that wasn't aligned to the other parts of News Corp in both the UK and the US. The legacy solution delivered a poor user experience for staff and partners, was fairly focused on our on-premise requirements and required people to be in the office to use it and enroll from a provisioning perspective. The legacy solution also primarily used voice dial solutions, which was slow, and with a mobile workforce and particularly with international travel, was problematic as well. As I highlighted before, the incumbent solution was limited in functionality. It had been primarily deployed when we had a majority on-prem application footprint, and we had to integrate a lot of other solutions to then support cloud-based SaaS applications and third-party platforms. So this became an amalgam of Windows AD, AD federated services, Microsoft Identity Management, Azure MFA, and Azure AD. So quite a complicated stack. So in terms of the project requirements, we required a phased migration strategy, focusing on the implementation of MFA first, and then a longer run phase for moving across single sign-on from our ADFS. So we had to have a platform that was able to provide the flexibility for that phase implementation. We also needed to implement each of the phases very quickly and go through a substantial change management program with all of our users that was straightforward and easy to follow, and didn't increase significantly any of the workload on our service desk. As I said, in terms of supporting that phased approach, we also needed the Okta solution to integrate that with the existing platform, and that's where Heirloom helped us to make sure that that could be completed. In terms of why AWS and why Okta, as David has set out, AWS has certainly got the ability to scale and grow. We're very confident as an existing AWS customer ourselves that it provides the secure and highly resilient and performant environment for any solution to run on. And so with Okta using that, it was a high level of confidence that we had in the underlying environment. With Okta itself, obviously has a cloud-first strategy, aligns with our expanded adoption of SaaS and third-party applications ourselves, as well as supporting all of our on-premise requirements. And as I said, aligned with the global adoption at our other regions, both in the UK and the US. And certainly as our companies work more closely on global solutions, it made sense to have a single identity platform to be able to leverage our solutions and products across our different regions. I set out before that we had a very complex best-of-breed stack, and with going to Okta, that definitely simplify the IDaaS solution and present a unified single sign-on and MFA system. And with its large number of integrated connectors out of the box, and with a commitment to continuously add more, it would reduce our integration workload as we adopted more applications. So I'll just hand over to Adrian to walk through the solution approach and the outcomes.
Thanks, Nick. Heirloom's been a long-time integration partner for News Corp Australia, although predominantly in the application delivery, but also the user access management space. And we identified very early on that Okta was going to be a strategic partner. So it was a really good fit for us to help the team at News transition from the existing identity solutions across into the Okta platform. But one of the key things for us that really made the project successful was just the sheer flexibility of the Okta platform. More specifically, the APIs that made it that are made available for integration. Because using those APIs, we were able to, along with some custom attributes that we added into the Okta Universal Directory, we're able to build a custom plugin for the existing on-prem ADFS service. And that really provided users with a really easy-to-use self-service workflow for when they were migrated across to the Okta multi-factor auth using the existing on-prem federation service. And with that in place, the users were really able to take control of how they authenticated into federated applications. And so we went ahead and deployed that in a pilot up the solution. We made a couple of changes, a few tweaks, tuning things, really a focus on making sure that we gave the users the best user experience possible. And then we rolled that out to production with really no noticeable disruption to the business whatsoever. So the real result of that was in a 2-week window, we were able to enroll over 9,000 staff into the Okta platform with very little impact to the business. The integration was very seamless to the existing on-prem stack, bringing News Corp Australia into line with the global standards. It was a really fast and simple enrollment process for the users, and we were able to deliver that in a really short time frame. So it's literally from the time we were engaged to the time we had the solution in production was 5 weeks, which is almost unheard of. One of the really interesting notes that came out of the rollout was where in the legacy solution on ADFS, users were roughly 90% of them were using voice for the second factor of authentication, whereas and then only 10% were using the mobile services. When we shifted that across into Okta and gave the users the ability to self-serve and self-choose how they were doing those extra factors of authentication, it's really reversed. And now over 90% of the users use the mobile push versus 10% using the voice services. So I'll just hand back to Nick to talk about the benefits.
Excellent, thanks, Adrian. So as part of the global rollout of Okta on AWS, News Corp also experienced the following benefits specific to this single sign-on project. So across all 3 regions, both in the UK, Australia, and the US, we basically onboarded 25,000 employees across 9 months, although ours was quite short and sharp at the end of that. To date, we've had 150 applications integrated into one identity solution, and 70% of provisioning tasks have been automated that were previously manual, with thousands of hours saved. And as I also flagged, there's going to be an alignment in terms of our supporting teams for this platform, as well as the leverage we have now in terms of different global teams using applications across the different groups, which is another benefit as we look to act more global as a single In terms of goals and future state, we're looking to decommission the legacy identity stack fully across to Okta and AWS with the support of Heirloom. And as I said before, that was that important separation in the phasing in terms of quickly adopting MFA and then decoupling from a single sign-on different applications at the back end from our legacy ADFS system. Without impacting the end users and basically doing that in a seamless fashion behind the scenes. We're also looking at a further phase, given that we're a Workday ERP user and Okta has a native connector for that, and we would replace some of the bespoke integration that we have provided, which will provide very seamless workflow process where we master employees in Workday, provision and deprovision identity through Okta. Even as an Australian company, we have quite onerous SOX compliance requirements given our global headquarters is in the US, and so that's very important to make sure that that process is airtight from a lifecycle management perspective. The support for third-party identities to internal and external data sources, i.e. different B2B partners we have, is something that we are able to explore now more easily. Given that we have the platform in place there, and there's definitely a focus on the full enablement of mobility for all of our staff, making sure that all of our new products and how we're mobilizing our staff are mobile friendly, greater security over employees' use of mobile devices, and increasing their ability from a policy and procedures perspective to use the tools of trade as required, which without intruding on their privacy. So with that short summary, I'll move to the Q&A piece and hand back to David and Madhu to facilitate.
Thanks, Nicholas. So we've got some really good questions come in. I'd like to see a few more because obviously we've got plenty of time on our hands, and this is a great opportunity for you to get access to both a customer story and also directly into a vendor to find out what you can do with these products. So please feel free to ask the questions. The first one that we had, you talked about federation. Could you just go into some of the protocols that Okta could support?
Yeah, this is Madhu from Okta. So Okta natively supports SAML. One of the older federation protocols is AWS Federation. We support that as well. Sometimes we see Shibboleth, which is primarily in the educational field, if you will. And last but not least, OpenID Connect. OpenID Connect is this newest standard which is out there in terms of supporting modern federation standards. But yeah, SAML 1.1 and 2.0 are the two main ones, and with OpenID Connect as a new upcoming federation standard.
So just to expand on that, is there any option to be able to integrate multi-factor authentication? And do you recommend any?
I think so we support a number of different factors, right? So the one that Nick was mentioning in terms of Okta Verify, which is our push-based multi-factor authentication. Basically, when you try to log in, once you've entered in your username and a password, you get a prompt on your phone, and that prompt basically says, "Do you approve this request, yay or nay?" And you just press yes or no, and it's that simple as that. You just press yes, and then now you're authenticated. These are, what you know factor, which is your password, and the what you have factor, which is your phone. Certainly, this can be expanded into other areas, such as what you are, which is biometrics, whether it's Touch ID or with the upcoming Face ID, for instance. The factors that we primarily support, they kind of go from maybe moderately secure to super secure, and you can tie multiple factors as well, right? So we support factors like the push-based MFA I mentioned, Google Authenticator, FIDO-based U2F security keys, which are these USB or USB-C keys that you can insert, and you have to touch them anytime you need to log in. SMS, voice calls, semantic VIP, so on and so forth. As far as recommending one or the other, I think it really depends on what kind of application you're trying to protect. As Nick was mentioning, if you're protecting access into Workday, which is your ERP system, you may need to have multiple factors in order to protect that access. If it is something a little bit more public-facing or marketing information, perhaps you don't need those 2 or 3 layers. All you need is a single factor. It could be a SMS, if you will.
Cool. So we had an interesting question in that this scenario, obviously, and the scenarios we talked about is starting essentially with an on-prem infrastructure element. If an organization is starting purely from the cloud, could you talk about how Okta can simplify that journey and how that would actually, the value they can gain from using Okta in a cloud-first strategy?
Right. I think one of the neat things that we're seeing when we use AWS and Okta and cloud-friendly strategies, if you will, is the first thing that's kind of pretty evident is you don't need to have on-prem data centers and software and so on and so forth, because everything is served via the web. What Okta has is about connections to about 5,000 plus applications, right? So pretty much any of these applications that are SaaS applications, that they're used by some amount of users, you're going to see this in our Okta integration network, all right? And what you're able to do is go inside Okta, go into the admin console, search for the application. Let's say if you're trying to add something like Salesforce, you would search for Salesforce. You would click on it, and then that would take you through about 2 or 3 steps in terms of configuring Salesforce in Okta, and at that point of time, your federation is complete. You can then assign that application to various groups or individual users, depending on your policy, so people will then get access to that application. That's how simple it is. As an example, federating with Salesforce or say with Office 365 as an example, these activities shouldn't take you more than, and let's say that proof of concept type of an activity shouldn't take you more than half an hour to 45 minutes. That's how quick it is.
So you mentioned proof of concept there. Can you expand if anyone on the webinar wanted to get involved with either getting in contact with the team or starting a free trial or proof of concept? Can you just kind of outline some of those either touch points or elements that they can go to start kick off a proof of concept or free trial?
Yeah, I mean, so there's 2 ways to do this, right? So if you are, you can go to the AWS Marketplace, search for Okta, and you'll see our link over there, and that'll get you started on that journey. That's probably one of the easiest ways to kind of do this. The other way to do this is to go to okta.com /partners/AWS or just okta.com. You'll see a free trial button over there. Just click on it, and then off you go. And if both of those methods don't work for you, just email one of us over here that you see in the email address, and we'll make sure that you're up and running quickly.
So could you expand on how the Okta Universal Directory syncs with the Office 365 and Azure AD?
Sure. So there's a couple of different ways of how we do this, and this is going to be one of those answers that needs possibly a few different disclaimers in terms of a lot of the different variables which are out there. If you're talking about integrating with AD or Active Directory, what Okta has is an agent, an AD agent that communicates with that Active Directory and then syncs information. You could also do it in a cloud-only fashion without the Active Directory component, in which case Okta directly communicates with Office 365. And we have built that kind of a connection directly to Office 365 where we're able to import information, provision information, or push information back to Office 365. And we're able to manage that whole life cycle, right? Creating that user, assigning the kind of Office 365 license that they may need, and removing that license maybe when they leave the company, so on and so forth.
So we've had a question around if there's a requirement to doing Okta on-prem only, is there any ability to do that, or is it a multi-cloud provision service anyway only?
So Okta is 100% built on AWS. It's the only offering that we have. You can certainly use Okta to authenticate and log into any application that you have on-prem. But Okta as a service, it is a SaaS offering. It's built on top of AWS, so there's no on-prem installation that is there. Now, one key thing that I would want to mention over here is that this is one of the benefits of a SaaS offering such as Okta. You don't have to maintain it, you don't have to patch it, you don't have to hotfix it. We do all of that stuff. We're responsible for the high availability of it. We're responsible for the security of it. Pretty much every week in a year, we offer updates and upgrades to our service, and this happens seamlessly to you. That's one of the benefits. So, but no, there is no on-premise data center-based installation for Okta.
So, can you just expand on some of the customization that's possible for the security experience? How do the policies apply? How can a customer tune them? Can you go into some of that detail around the element around the customization for securing and personalizing?
Sure. This is one of the neat things about Okta, right? Because you're able to get into the admin console and you can set up policies visually. And there's primarily two types of policies that are there that kind of come into a picture. One is password policies. These password policies then kind of determine how your passwords need to be, how long do they need to be, what are the quality aspects of the password, how often do you need to change them, so on and so forth. So you can have these password policies, a number of them, and you can assign it on a group-by-group basis. So that's one aspect of how you can customize it. The second aspect of it is sign-on policies. Those sign-on policies determine what type of an experience that person is going to have when they access perhaps a low-value application or a high-value application. We can determine based on what IP address they're coming in. If they're coming in from Australia, maybe there's a certain way of accessing them. If they're coming in from, say, California, and you know, maybe they need to step up their authentication. So we're able to then have different sort of sign-on policies based on, and that allows you to customize that experience. And going back to the point that I mentioned, really tune the usability and security dial based on how you need it to be.
Cool. So obviously rolling out a big change like this could be quite daunting. Could either the Heirloom or News Corp guys talk about how they went about setting the expectation within the business for implementing this, and was there anything that had to be done around changing or setting expectation around moving to a cloud-based solution?
So it's Nicholas Tan here from News Corp. I suppose we were lucky in that we are substantially through our cloud adoption journey, and so having a hybrid approach and using a range of on-prem and cloud-based applications was something that the user base was comfortable with. We have fully adopted Google G Suite for 4+ years now. So in actual fact, it was more of a user pull factor, convenience-wise, that, for instance, being able to interact with the identity platform, reset your choices or your options, even the provisioning process, given that we have a number of both internal staff but also third-party partners, contractors, etc. So onboarding them was problematic if they always had to come into a particular site or office network location. We found that the rollout was actually quite seamless and was improved in terms of any of the users being able to do it at home at night. They just logged onto the web browser, onto the web portal using their normal username and password they use for all the other applications and go through the onboarding process. So certainly we had a vigorous communication campaign. There was lots of marketing type material that Okta provided, which was great, kind of poster style stuff, reinforcement emails, and quite easy instructions. And that was something that we were basically pushing out every day to reinforce, and cutting down the list that we were emailing to every day as we saw more and more people go through the self-service provisioning process, which is good. Didn't see a large increase hit in terms of service desk calls, you know, how do I do this, whatever. So I think the proof is in the outcome that the eclectic user base we had were fairly happy to onboard themselves fairly easily.
Awesome. So I'd just like to thank all the participants, and thank you for everyone for listening, and have a good day.